Hi, I'm Nikki from Find Me Crafting. I want to introduce you to one of the most versatile and fabulous sewing projects you can do. It's called a wet bag, and it's called that because this fabric, it's called polyurethane laminate, PUL for short, is waterproof. Anything wet or moist that you put into this bag is not going to leak out and get on anything else. And I personally think everybody needs one of these. Let me tell you why. We'll start young with babies. If you have a baby in your life, you know there's wetness and moisture constantly. They are adorable, but they're little mess makers. There's spit up, there's diaper blowouts, there's other food messes, and you can just throw the wet clothes into a wet bag and into a diaper bag, and it's not going to get anything else wet or gross. You could keep dry clothes in the bag, and when it's time you take out the dry clothes, put in the wet clothes. Easy peasy. Let's move on to toddlers and potty training. Now you know there's going to be some wet messes you have to deal with out and about in public. Put all of the wet, gross clothes into the wet bag, and it's easy to transport them home ready for washing. And speaking of washing, these bags are washable. You just throw them right into the washing machine like normal, and they're ready for use again. How about swimsuits? If you go to a beach or a pool, where are you going to put that wet swimsuit or maybe even wet towel so that it's not touching anything else and getting it wet? Wet bag. Speaking of wet and gross, how about sweaty gym clothes? If you're changing at the gym, where are you going to put them so that you're not getting other things wet and sweaty? Wet bag. They're really great for travel too. Anytime we have gone to, say, a hotel or a beach, those swimsuits never seem to be dry when I'm ready to throw them into a suitcase. And I really don't like throwing them into a suitcase and letting them just create that stew where all that moisture is just sitting locked in a suitcase for hours. You can throw them into a wet bag, and then when you get home, ready for washing. And you can add this nifty strap on the end. It has a snap. You can hang it from your wrist. You could wrap it around a towel bar to hang and dry. You can put it on the outside of a gym bag or a diaper bag. It keeps things even more convenient. And you can also wrap it up and store it really small and tight like this, ready for use, not even taking up much space. You're gonna want some of these for yourself and pretty much everybody else you know. Come on, I'll show you how. Let's talk about what you're going to need for supplies. You're going to need some PUL fabric. And this kind of fabric has a fabricy side that you can get in solids or prints, whatever you like. The other side is sort of rubbery, and this is the waterproof, water resistant side. You need 2 pieces of fabric. You need to cut out your PUL fabric so that one piece is 13 inches wide by 28 inches long. And if you want to make a strap out of the polyurethane laminate, you're also going to want a piece that is cut to 2.5 inches wide by 12 inches long. I like to make my strap out of the PUL fabric itself. That way I know if I'm at the pool or somewhere else and the bag gets a little bit wet, even the strap is not going to become damp because it is water resistant. But if you wanted to make your life just a tiny bit easier, you could use a strapping or webbing to make your strap, and you would cut that also to 12 inches. You'll also need a zipper. It needs to be at least 14 inches long. Mine is 18 inches. It is comically much larger than it needs to be for the bag itself. But having a larger zipper does make it much, much easier to sew for a few of the steps. You need some sewing clips. You don't want to use pins to create this project because pins will put holes in your PUL fabric, making it less water resistant or waterproof. Those holes do not heal, so you want to use clips. If you want to add the plastic snaps, you need to have all the pieces to do one set of snaps. That means you're going to need 2 of the caps. Those are the ones with the little pointy bit. You need 1 of the outie belly button pieces and 1 of the innie belly button pieces. You need an awl. You need a way to install your plastic snaps. I will be using a cam snap table press. If you're using a table press with me, you need an adapter base and the 2 plastic snap dies. You could also use a handheld snap press. You would need a cutting mat, a cutting ruler, a rotary cutter, or a pair of fabric scissors. You're going to want a fabric marking tool, or my guilty favorite is a permanent Sharpie. 100% polyester thread and a sewing machine. You're also going to want a zipper foot for your sewing machine if you happen to have one. It is much, much easier and more accurate when you're sewing on the zipper if you have one of these feet. If you're making your own strap from the pull fabric, I do also highly recommend a tube turning tool. This will make your life much easier. It's pretty inexpensive. You're really going to love turning out any sort of fabric tubes that you have to sew in the future with one of these. I'm going to start by making my strap. If you are using webbing or strapping, you can skip this step. But if you are like me and want to make one out of pull, you're going to take your fabric piece that you've already cut. You want to fold it in half so that the right sides, the fabric sides, are together along the length of the cut. And you want to clip that in place. So now I'm going to take this piece to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew down the open edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I am going to sew across one end, sew up this one end of my fabric tube. Now I want to trim just the corners off of my tube. This is the end that I sewed shut. Don't cut your stitch line, just cut right near it. And now I need to flip this right side out. And here's where your turning tool comes in really, really handy. You need to take one of the tubes, and this large one will fit in here, so that's what I'm going to use. You want to push all the fabric down near the bottom of the tube so that one end is all the way at your closed off end. And you can take the dowel looking one, and you're going to push that inside the plastic tube you just put in. And I'm going to flip it around. And now just push your fabric down over the tube and over the dowel. And it is right side out. I still have the dowel inside. I'm going to use that to poke the corners of my fabric out. We want those to look squared. Now I'm going to take my tube back to the sewing machine. I am going to sew down the side with a 1/8 inch seam across my closed end, and back down the other side with a 1/8 inch seam. I'm just top stitching it so that it's not so puffy and round and it holds it all together. And you do want to make sure that the seam you just made is on the side of your strap so that you're not going to really see it from the front or the back. Now you can set your strap off to the side until later. We want to begin working on the bag itself. So you want to take your pull fabric that you've cut, and you want to put one of the short ends up here near the top. You're going to grab your zipper, and you're going to want to face the zipper right side down. So this is the right side with the zipper pull on it. I'm going to put that face down onto the front of my pull, and you just want to center it up a little bit. Like I said, my zipper is really, really big, but you just want to get it about center, and then you want to line it up with the top edge and clip it in place. Now it's time to put your zipper foot onto your sewing machine, and you want to take your fabric to the sewing machine and sew down the side of this zipper with about a 1/4 inch seam, getting pretty darn close to the zipper itself. Now I want to flip my zipper over, and what I want to do in my next step is top stitch the fabric to the zipper. So I want to hold my fabric away from the zipper a little bit, lightly pull. You don't want to pull too much because this fabric is really stretchy. So when you're sewing, make sure you're not pulling on it. But you want to just make sure that this is pulled away from your zipper. And I'm top stitching the top of my fabric to this fabric area of the zipper underneath. So I'm going to sew really pretty close to the edge of my fabric onto the zipper. Now we want to sew the second side of the pull to the second side of the zipper. So I'm going to flip mine around and open it up and bring the second side of my wet bag up to this side of the zipper. I'm going to line up all my edges here. I'm going to take my fabric marking tool, or really my Sharpie, which you should absolutely not use. I'm going to tell you not to use it because it could show on your project. I'm going to use it because it works the best for me. All my fabric markers are dried out. And I want to mark where my fabric should be on the second side to line up with the fabric from the first side. So I'm just going to make a mark on my zipper here to the edge and make one at the other end. So you want to flip it so that the right sides, the pretty sides of the fabric, are facing one another. And you want to line up the line that you made on the front of your zipper with the edge of the fabric, so we know we're getting everything straight. Keeping in mind that while you do this, the pull side, the right side of your zipper, will be facing down toward your fabric, and just clip it all along the top edge. You do want to make sure that your second mark is lining up with the edge of your fabric. And then we need to take it back to the sewing machine, and once again with the zipper foot, sew down this side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now let's flip it right side out. And this next step is where having the really long zipper comes in handy. You need to open it up, and we need to top stitch on the side that we just attached. Figure out which one that is. It's really helpful to have the zipper this wide open so that you can have the fabric and everything out of your way while you are top stitching the fabric to the zipper. So just a very small seam right here. At this point, you definitely want to check your zipper. Make sure everything is working properly and smoothly, because you don't want to have to go back after this step to fix a zipper. So now we're going to sew the bag itself together. So we need to flip it inside out. We are now going to be sewing the sides of the bag together. I like the way my bags look if I have about 2 inches here at the top where the zipper is not sitting, where there's just fabric. That puts the zipper on the front of the bag, not at the top. I think that just looks more professional. So I'm just going to make sure I have about 2 inches across the top here. And when I have it about even, I am going to clip it in place just to hold that so that it doesn't slide around on me. And now I'm going to line up my side edges and clip that all in place. But there is one step you need to do before you get that far. You want to make sure your zipper is open about halfway. Otherwise, you're going to have real difficulty flipping this right side out once you're done sewing. Just make sure that your zipper is still lined up here as you clip the sides. If you're adding a strap, here's where we add it to the fabric. If you're adding a snap to your fabric, you only need to sew one end into your side seam. So I'm going to have my finished edge, the one that I sewed across, I'm going to put that inside my fabric. With my unfinished edge, I'm going to put that just a little bit outside my fabric so that I know I'm sewing across it. That's just my little security. I'm going to have about 1/2 inch sticking out, and I'm going to put it about 1/2 inch down from my right side here. And I'm just going to clip that along with my side seam. If you are not adding a snap to your strap, you would want both of your strap edges to be in this side seam when you sew down the side. So you would line both of them up with the side and clip it in place. Now I'm just going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew down just the two sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I am going to switch back to my regular foot on my sewing machine, where we are sewing on the rubbery side of the fabric, and that is a little more slippery, and I find it much easier to get an accurate seam if I use my regular foot. Make sure as you're sewing that you kind of hold your zipper together so that it is in place to zipper exactly the way you want it to at the end. Now's the time to trim off your excess zipper and also that excess strap, that little bit there, and the corners. We want to remove some of the bulk. Do not cut your stitch line, just cut next to it. And I'm going to do that for all 4 corners and the other side of my zipper. And now it's time to flip the whole thing right side out through the open zipper. And poke out all of your corners. You can open up the zipper a little more if you want. The bag itself is done. You can test your zipper again, make sure everything's working there. And if you're adding a snap, all that's left to do is add the snap onto the strap. I'm going to fold over my strap so that it is about where I want it to be snapped. I'm leaving a little bit of a gap there between the bag itself and the end of the strap. You're going to grab your awl and punch through both the top of the strap and the bottom of the strap at the same time. And then you just want to install your snaps in the holes you just made. If you have any difficulty with snaps, I will put a link up here for a tutorial that walks you through a bit slower. Make sure that your snap works properly. And she's done. If you wanted to roll your wet bag up and secure with the strap, you need to have the strap open, and from the bottom edge, you're going to fold up a few times till you meet the top edge. And then from the bottom, farthest away from the strap, you're going to tightly roll your fabric up toward the strap. And then I'm going to turn my strap so that the snap piece is left exposed, and I'm going to wrap the fabric of the strap around my little ball of fabric twice. You do need to turn your snap piece so that it's facing this direction so that the snap pieces will meet. And then you just wrap around and snap in place. And it's all nice and tidy. There are so many ways to use these bags, and since they take less than an hour to sew, I'm making a whole bunch to give away and use myself. Happy crafting!